How are you doing, everybody? My name is Clint Powell, and it's one of our deep dives with Eric Buchanan. It's where I bring Eric on and I ask him a question that you may relate to, and it may help you out. Just in full transparency, I'm a nobody. I'm just the guy hosting the video, but I am and have been in the past a client of Eric Buchanan and his team. That's why I advocate for him whenever possible, because I've gotten the denial letters and the scary letter from the insurance company that is in two font, written in old English with a bunch of deadlines and terms I don't understand. And I walk in like a small child and hand it to one of his team members, and they go, "We got you. We can handle this. We speak insurance too." And that's why I love doing these videos. So let me pull this off the screen, and Eric can tell you more about what he does. And then here's going to be the question for the day. If I get my insurance through work and I become disabled, I have to start taking long-term disability, or I have to start taking some sort of disability. What happens to my insurance? Where do I get my insurance from? And I think Eric might clean that up for me if I've asked it wrong or framed it wrong. But let's bring him up and we'll start. 3, 2, 1. What's going on, Eric Buchanan? How you doing, sir?
Hey, Clint, how are you? Good to see you today.
Good seeing you. Tell everybody what you guys do on your team. And did I set the premise of that up right? Because I want to make sure that I'm doing the justice to the question, so then the answer makes more sense.
You did. We will get
Good.
into this, and it's a scary thing that a lot of people go through. You get hurt, you get sick, anything from cancer to a mental illness to whatever
Yeah.
happens, you can't keep doing your job anymore. And you get your health insurance through work. What's going to happen to your health insurance? How are you going to pay your medical bills? How are you going to prove you're disabled if you can't keep paying your doctors and get the treatment you need? How are you going to try to get better if you can't get the treatment you need? How are you going to document to the insurance company what the reason for your disability is if you can't keep seeing doctors and go to the hospital when you need to? So we'll talk about all that.
Okay.
Very quickly about me and my firm. You may be watching this on our website, in which case you probably all know about us. But if you found us on YouTube or some other location, we are a disability insurance firm in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that helps people all over the United States who have been denied disability through an insurance company, either long-term disability insurance. We also help with life insurance, long-term care policies, and we'll do health insurance cases, especially ones that involve a significant amount of money. We'll do that all over the United States. We work with local attorneys in other locations where we need to. And if you haven't found us already, we're on the World Wide Web at buchanandisability.com, and you can call us toll free 877-634-2506. So yeah, you asked the question pretty well. It's let's just pretend like you're that guy.
Yeah, use me as the guinea pig on this one,
Yeah,
Eric. Set me up who I need to be, so then you can make the point.
So unfortunately, you're going through what our clients often go through, which is this life-changing moment in their medical condition, where what they have has gotten worse, or they suddenly get something that's really bad. They get in an accident, they get sick, they get a form of cancer, they get a back injury, whatever it is, and now all of a sudden they can't do the job that they used to, and maybe they can't do any work at all. And their health insurance has been provided through their employer. So what options do they have? What are the different ways that they can keep getting health insurance and ensure that they still have some coverage? So I'm going to cover some of the basics about that.
Okay.
So the first thing to be aware of is if you work for an employer that has 20 or more employees, then they're required to fall under the federal law called COBRA. And COBRA was passed back in the 1990s. And the idea with COBRA is that if you have health insurance at work and you stop working for a qualifying reason, and most of the reasons people quit working due to a disability would be qualifying reasons, or if their coverage ends due to a qualifying reason, like if your spouse quits working due to a disability, or you get divorced and you had your insurance through your spouse, any of those kind of events happen. If your employer had 20 or more full-time employees or the equivalent, then you can get COBRA, which means you can keep your health insurance for up to 18 months. However, you have to pay for it.
Right.
And you have to pay for, I think the number is 102% of what your employer was paying. So if before you...
By the way, real quick, I'm going through that right now. So you're talking to me a little bit right there on this. And now I feel like a little like you're targeting me. I feel like I'm in church and hearing the sermon.
Like this is a real thing going on.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about that offline if you need to,
ahead.
if there's anything else we need to help you with there. And I don't mean to make light of this, because this could be a horrible situation for people who are getting disabled and or have some reason they're losing their health insurance. So the number one thing you need to know is that if there's 20 or more employees at your company, that the government will require you to be covered by COBRA, and you should be able to keep your health insurance, but you have to pay for it. Now there's some pitfalls and there's some other good news. So the normal rule for COBRA is that it can last up to 18 months. However, if you are found disabled by the Social Security Administration before those 18 months are up, you can extend it for 29 months. And that will allow you to keep your health insurance through work up to 29 months. And we'll come back to that in a minute, why that matters. But basically, that matches up to when your Medicare starts under Social Security. But let's finish talking about COBRA first.
Okay.
So, what are some of the other things to be aware of with COBRA? Well, your employer or the health insurance company has to send you a letter within a certain number of days. I think it's 45 days. And they have to tell you you're eligible for COBRA. And once they send you that letter and they tell you you're eligible for COBRA, they'll tell you a time limit in the letter, and I'm pretty sure it's 30 days, that you need to say, yes, I want to get my COBRA and keep it. And you need to pay for it. You need to send them a check during that window.
Yeah.
One of the really tough things, almost some might say it's unfair, but this is the way they wrote the law back in the 1990s. If you don't keep those payments up to date, if you miss any of the payments and you lose your COBRA, you can't get it back. You're done. So if you pay for 2 months and you miss the payment in the third month, but you say, but I got 18 months of COBRA. No, your COBRA just ended.
Yeah.
So you've got to pay every month for 18 months. Now, people will ask the question, well, how the heck am I going to get the money to pay for this? That's a tough thing to do. If you become disabled, you no longer have your income, you haven't started getting maybe your long-term disability or Social Security yet. And my answer is it's going to make it a lot harder to get your long-term disability or your Social Security if you don't have the insurance to have the medical records, the medical treatment, plus you don't have a chance to get better or just to prove how bad you are. Any of those things, you need to have health insurance to pay for that treatment, and paying for the health insurance is way cheaper than actually paying for the medical bills. So this is that time in your life to dig into any savings you might have, to borrow against the equity in your house, to borrow from family members, or find some way to come up with the money to pay for that health insurance to fill in any gap that might be going on until either your Medicare starts. We'll talk about that in a minute. Or if you might be eligible for health insurance from your company if you're out on disability. So that's a possibility too. And we'll talk about that next. So
Okay.
you look like you had a question, Clint.
Well,
Sorry.
I was just saying it reminds me of the pickup sticks game. Like you got to do one thing first, but you can't move any of the other sticks. And you're like, well, how can I get to the third stick if I can't afford to do the first two sticks? It's like I've got to move something. And if me having income if it's dependent on that and our insurance, now all of a sudden I'm in a pickle. Like to your point, so this is why it becomes not funny and the humor is removed, because all of a sudden people are sitting around the kitchen table going, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills. How do I get better? And how do I go to the doctor? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, here's one way to answer that. If you could possibly have an emergency fund, there's
Mhm.
financial advisors that recommend that you do that. Have a few $1,000s for an emergency fund. This would be the time to use your emergency fund. If you have a little bit of savings, if you have cash value in a life insurance policy or something like that to pay for your COBRA to keep your health insurance, might be a good time to borrow that money so you can keep your health insurance, to borrow against life insurance, to borrow against the equity in your home, to take out a HELOC or something like that, to talk to mom,
Yeah.
to talk to some other family members and say, I would never have to do this, but right now my health insurance has stopped and the only way I can keep it is to pay for COBRA, and I need whatever it is, $800 a month, $900 a month for the next little while until I get some other health insurance in place.
Well, I'm going to get you move forward because we're going to talk about with Medicare. There's other things, but it's basically in life. Sometimes you just have to ask for help on a bridge. I just need help from here to there, and then the help will be over. I just need somehow to space that gap, which we all have gone down that road. I've been down that road. Everyone will go down that road at some point in time. We all need a little helping hand from time to time.
Yeah, so let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about COBRA, and then we'll
Yeah.
talk about some of those other things. So one of the things I mentioned a second ago was that COBRA is for 18 months. It can be, there are other qualifying events, just so you know. It's not just if you go on a disability. It can be if you get fired and laid off, but it's not for cause. It's like if the company doesn't need you anymore because they've got too many employees and there's a downturn or whatever. It can also be if you are the one who's covered under your spouse's policy and you get divorced or your spouse passes away. Any of those type things will
Mm.
qualify for you for COBRA, and the company should send you a letter. If one of those things happens to you and they don't send you a letter, you should ask your employer, "Hey, am I eligible for COBRA? Can you send me the letter?" One of the things they might say is, "Well, we don't have 20 full-time employees." Okay, well then maybe we're not eligible for COBRA. So a little side note to that is some states have smaller versions of COBRA where, for example, in Tennessee, where you and I are, they small employers have to offer 3 months of continued coverage. But for employers with 20 or more, it's 18 months. And like I said, it can be extended to 29 months. So let's talk about the 29 months for a second.
Okay.
So the reason that matters is that if you get found disabled for Social Security, so if you're disabled enough you can't work in any occupation and you're never going to work again, that's typically the test to get Social Security disability benefits. In footnote, I used to be a board certified Social Security specialist. I've been doing Social Security cases since the mid 90s, almost well over 25 years at this point. And we don't do them anymore in our firm because we help so many people with long-term disability. But we do have an of counsel attorney we work with, and she's been doing Social Security as long as I have. She got board certified the same time I did. Her name is Donna Green, if you want to find her on our website. And she handles local Social Security cases, but we can also help somebody find a Social Security attorney wherever they live, anywhere in the United States. We've got a pretty good network. I've been very involved in the Social Security world for a long time.
Okay.
Here's the important thing to understand about Social Security. If you're found disabled by Social Security, from the date that they say you became disabled, whatever date they agree you couldn't work anymore, the earliest that they can start paying benefits is 5 months later.
Okay.
Okay. For regular Social Security benefits, there's different rules for SSI. I'm not going to get into SSI is for very, very poor people.
Mm-hmm.
Most people who have disability insurance are probably not going to qualify for SSI. Maybe some will. That might be a more advanced conversation, but let's just cover what's going to happen to most people. If you are disabled and you're trying to get your LTD and you also normally would apply for Social Security, most people do. Most LTD policies say you should apply for Social Security. If you can't work basically in any occupation is the test that Social Security is going to use. You go through the Social Security process, and maybe they pay you at the first step, maybe the second step, maybe the third step. Sometimes it's even the fourth or fifth step of Social Security, unfortunately. That's the fight you have to go through. If they find you disabled, then the date that they say you became disabled, your checks are going to start 5 months later. Now, I'll put a little caveat to this. They can't pay you more than 12 months of back pay. So someone who waits too long to apply, there's a different rule.
Okay.
If you wait a couple years to apply for Social Security, the most they can give you is 12 months of back pay. Okay.
I understand.
And that date that they pay you back to, whether it's 5 months after you stop working or if you apply way later, paying back to the 12 months prior to your application, is called your date of entitlement. That's the month you get your first Social Security check for, and sometimes that's in the form of back pay, where they're paying you back your Social Security money back to that date of entitlement, the month you should have gotten your first check.
Okay. I'm with you.
From that date of entitlement, add 24 months, and that's when the government starts giving you Medicare coverage.
That's how you get to your 29
That's
months.
that's how you get to
Yeah.
29 months. Is you add 24 and 5 from the time basically you stop working
Yep.
because you got a disability. And if Social Security ultimately agrees that's when you became disabled, then 29 months later, you can start getting Medicare. What do you do in the meantime? Well, for the first 18 months, you can have COBRA if you pay for it. And if you happen to win your Social Security case during those 18 months, and that's kind of a little bit of an if because it takes so long sometimes for Social Security to pay a case. But if you win your Social Security case within the 18 months, then you take that Social Security decision, and I think it's 30 days. You have 30 days to give it to the COBRA company, to your
Mm-hmm.
insurance company that's providing your COBRA insurance, whoever the health insurance company was you had to work. You send them a copy of your decision, and they that tells them that they have to extend your Social Security. I mean, extend your COBRA from 18 months to 29 months. Now, one of the things they screwed up when they wrote the law in the 1990s was, what if Social Security takes a long time and it takes me 20 months to finally get this decision, but it says I've been disabled the whole time? And the answer is tough noogies.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the way the Social Security law actually works is sometimes it takes a long time to get a favorable decision. And at the same time, the COBRA law has this very strict rule. In order to keep your COBRA more than 18 months, you have to have a favorable Social Security decision in your hand and give it to the insurance company before the 18 months is up. and you have
Well,
to give it to them in a short period of time, like 30 days.
yeah, and that tough that is legalese that you just use. That's really high end
Legalese
legal terms.
for it's not fair.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just
it.
they
Yeah.
that whoever wrote the bill in the mid 1990s. I don't want to get into the politics behind it. We
No,
could
no,
have that over a different conversation some other time.
that's a different podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a different podcast. That just they did not really fully understand that a lot of people, it takes more than 18 months before you finally win your Social Security case.
Well, that's just goes from book stuff to reality. It looks like maybe reality was not really given the appropriate weight in that conversation. But continue on, sir.
I just don't think I just don't think they really they didn't have the right people helping them on writing the law. And they didn't really
Mhm.
understand how it works. All right, so that's how you get to Medicaid or Medicare, and that's how you get to get to keep your COBRA if possible. There is some good news for some people where they don't have to worry about that right away, and maybe they don't have to worry about that at all. And that is that a lot of employers, not all, and it's not guaranteed and it's not required, but a fair number of employers have a rule that says if you go out on company long-term disability, if we have a long-term disability policy at our work and you become disabled and Unum or Hartford or MetLife or Prudential, whoever agrees you're disabled, that we will allow you to keep the company health insurance under certain terms. Maybe we continue to pay for it. Maybe we pay for it the same way we have been, where we pay half or you pay half.
Hmm.
Whatever it is, they have that rule that allows you to keep the company health insurance. That is not your COBRA. COBRA doesn't start until that ends. So you can keep your health insurance for extra time while you're getting long-term disability. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this little video to talk about this is one of the things we get into is, okay, so I become disabled. The insurance companies agreed to pay me for maybe my own occupation. And so for that 2 years, I'm getting my long-term disability. I'm in the process of applying for Social Security, but I'm also my company is keeping my health insurance in place. Then the insurance company at some point says I'm no longer disabled. This happens all the time. This is when people call us. When the insurance company says we're not going to pay your benefits, they call Eric Buchanan and Associates. We get right in there and start working on it. If we can convince the insurance company to change their mind, then your employer should restart the health insurance. Now, it's an open question whether they would have to pay any bills that come due during the time period you didn't have health insurance. That depends on how the policy is written. And so that's not a clear cut thing. But if the insurance company decides you're still disabled and starts your long-term disability back up, then you should get the company health insurance back if you work for a company that offers that option, that offers that health insurance to continue. One of the problems that we run into is that if you start getting long-term disability or you never get it at all and they cut you off, so they just say we're not going to pay your long-term disability. Either they stop paying your benefits or they never pay them in the first place, and we fight with the insurance company. We can't get them to change their mind, so we take them to court. We're going to get a court to fix this. And we get into court. If we get the court to order that the insurance company was wrong and that technically in ERISA cases we might be required to show they were arbitrary and capricious. If that happens, then the insurance company has to start paying your benefits again, and you should get the company health insurance, if that's what the plan says. But a lot of people get to court, and the disability insurance company will say, look, this is how much all your future benefits are worth. If you were to win this case, we would owe you this much over the next 20 years. If you're, say you're 47 now and the policy pays to age 67, this is the present value of those benefits. This is the theoretical max you could ever get. We would not have to pay you anything if we win the case. So where can we compromise in the middle? Can we pay you some money that you take it, you get some money for sure. You settle the case with us, and then we will not owe anything anymore. The insurance company will get out of the case. You get out of the case goes away, but you get a check and you can get on with your life.
Mhm.
And that check may not be anywhere close to all the benefits they would have had to pay you, but it's better than zero.
It's
Or
better
it
than
could
losing.
better than losing your
Mhm.
case. Or it could be a decent check that covers a fair amount of that. And that's basically how some of these long-term disability cases resolve. One thing to be aware of, though, is if you get a settlement, then the insurance company no longer says you're disabled. So what does your employer say about, well, do I still have to pay this guy health insurance? The answer is no, probably,
Mm.
because if that happens, you're not getting a continued long-term disability check. Now, we have been able to, in the past, in a few cases, get the employer to work something out with us where they get a portion of their health insurance for a few months, but it's very rare. And the reason I'm saying this in this video is if somebody is our client or is wants to be our client and they're thinking about settling their LTD case and the health insurance is very important to them, we will try to pay attention to that, but you should also remind us that something's important to you, and we can try to get that as maybe part of the settlement, or at least we go into it knowing that all you get is a check, and then how are you going to get some more insurance? Now, the good news is what typically happens is somebody who's been paid for a while by their long term disability company and has had the health insurance, when they cut it off, that becomes a COBRA qualifying event. So you can at least keep your health insurance for a while. And then eventually you get to that point where it's been 29 months since you stopped working in the first place. And hopefully you win your Social Security case.
And now you
And,
have enough.
and now you have
Yeah.
Medicare. And now
Right.
you don't need the health insurance. And it makes it easier for you to go, okay, I can settle my long term disability case. You can also, we'll have clients who can't get the health insurance through work. And it happens a fair amount. And then this isn't an issue. Unfortunately, they just have to worry about whether they're going to be able to afford COBRA until they get to their Medicare. The other
I
good news, the other thing I
oh
just want to make sure everybody
yeah,
knows
yeah.
is
Go for it.
once you turn 65, you get Medicare. As long as you paid into the system, as long as you were covered by Medicare. And that's for most people who are working that are going to have long-term disability policies. So we're really just talking about how are we, for younger people, that's a long time away. For older people, we just got to get you to 65 and get your Medicare. But if you win your Social Security case, you get Medicare sooner.
Yeah.
So I always recommend to people who come to us for long-term disability cases, you should apply for Social Security right away. One, it helps you get Medicare sooner. Two, the insurance company is probably going to require you to do it. And three, that long-term disability, that the Social Security case can be, if you win that, can be good evidence in your long-term disability case. The bad news is long-term disability policies offset for how much money you get from Social Security, but they require you to apply anyway. Many policies basically say we would offset for what you would get from Social Security, so you might as well apply.
You might as well apply.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we can cover this more in another podcast. Why you should apply for Social Security and LTD at the same time. But the important thing to understand for today's podcast: the sooner you get your Medicare, the
Mhm.
sooner it takes the pressure off of you to worry about whether you can keep paying for COBRA or whether or not you're going to do whatever it takes to keep your company health insurance and not have that fight anymore.
I want to just say a couple quick things. I'm gonna hand it back to you to wrap it up. Make sure people know how to find you and what you want to make sure people take away from it. Kind of wrapping up, but two things. One is the reason I think it's important to go to somebody like Eric, and I recommend going to Eric and his team is so many of what you say, and we've done these other videos with your team members, and it's the ifs and whens and whats, depending on policies. There's these variables that they're just not cookie cutter answers, because what I have in a policy is different than what Barbara might have in a policy, than different what Tom. The last thing I'll say is you said one of the problems. I think the main problem is, and this is Clint speaking from Clint's perspective, and I'm 55 years old, is 90% of the time when I was raising a family or working and I'm buying insurance, I am buying the one that is financially more feasible for me, and I'm reading the policy only to know the big stuff. I'm not reading deep into the policy. I hate to say that. That is what most people do. They sit at the table and they go, which one can we afford? Which one's going to help our family the most? Where are we at? Do we have 3 kids that are young, or now are we just me and you, or is it just am I single? So financially, I'm picking the one that I can absorb the most. And then the details of the policy, I just like, I'm sure it's going to be fine. That's why I think, one thing I've learned from just knowing you for 20 something years is read the policy, know what's in it, because if you get denied and there's an issue at that point, you better know what's in it, or better come to somebody that can read it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to throw into this mix is if for some reason you are not eligible for Medicare yet because you haven't won your Social Security case, and you are no longer eligible for COBRA because it's gone past 18 months, or for some reason you missed the opportunity to pay for it, which would be, that's just, don't do that.
Yeah.
But for some reason you're no longer eligible for your company health insurance, typically because the 18 months has run out and you haven't won your Social Security case yet. The one other possibility is the Affordable Care Act website, what some people call Obamacare. They do still offer policies. The rules on that are getting, slightly different over time. but they can be expensive, and their coverage can be different. But having that is better than having no insurance at all. And so, my last important point I want to make is figuring out one of these different ways to keep your insurance, whether it's through Cobra, whether it's making sure that the company provides you health insurance while you're on long-term disability, if that's an option, applying for Social Security so eventually you get Medicare. It's extremely valuable for your family's health and your family's finances. You need to be healthy for your family, and you need to be as healthy as possible. Even if you're sick, even if something's horrible is going on that made you disabled, it's not going to get any better, or it's not going to be maintained, or it's not going to be treated if you don't have some kind of health insurance. Because doctors, it's just going to be tough.
Yeah.
It's going to be really hard to pay for that stuff. So if you can pay for health insurance through Cobra, do it. If you can get on Medicare by applying for Social Security, do it. If you can find some other way to talk to your employer about whether they're continue your health insurance, do it. If you need to go to the Affordable Care Act website, the Obamacare website, do it.
Mm-hmm.
People who don't have health insurance, not only does it affect their health and their ability to pay for the treatment that they need, it makes it way harder to prove their disability case. It makes it way harder to get doctors who are going to explain why they're disabled. It makes it way harder to get the objective testing like x-rays or exams or, chemical test or blood test or urine, whatever test you need that can help explain why you're disabled. Those things all become way harder if you don't have a doctor to treat you. And if you have an emergency and go to the hospital, they might treat you, but they're going to go after you for those bills.
Yep.
And it makes life way, way harder. And I understand people, and some people, none of this works. So we'll try to help people with those options and explain all this over again. But if you become disabled and you can't work and you have questions about your health insurance, I hope you've listened to this video.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're talking to us, if we're helping you, we can go over all this all over again and make sure that you've got the best answers possible.
Yeah. BuchananDisability.com is where it starts. I recommend, because I have a law degree from the streets. So I recommend everything Eric said. I would just make sure that you follow up with one thing he did say. And when in doubt, go talk to somebody like Eric and his team, because then you're going to get sound advice, not just what my cousin's third aunt said or my buddy thinks I should do. I want to know somebody that speaks that language. I want to know what Eric says I should do. That's what got me through my spots. That's what I recommend other people do when you're sitting around the table not knowing which way to go.
My last piece of advice to close this out is
Yep.
if you have any questions about your long-term disability or disability insurance, before the insurance company turns you down, give us a call. If they've turned you down the first time, it is really important that you give us a call before they turn you down a second time. There's some other rules we are going to go over, and we have gone over in a different podcast about how if the insurance company denies you twice, you can end up with a closed record and no way to add additional evidence. And that puts us in a bind, and we can only do so much to help you. We can still make arguments, but we can't make the best case we can. We can help, and our help can be better and it can be more effective the earlier you call us in the process.
BuchananDisability.com. Eric, is that the best way for folks to find you? Should we wrap it up like that?
BuchananDisability.com, or call us toll free 877-634-2506.
Thank you very much, Eric Buchanan, man.
Yeah, thanks, Clint.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Good seeing you
Talk
today.
to you. Bye, everybody. And we're